Call to order the July 17th meeting of the Brentwood Board of Aldermen. If you'd all rise and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a roll call, please.
Alderman Demmett. Alderman Kramer.
Present.
Alderman Leahy.
Here.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Here.
Alderman Plufka.
Here.
Alderwoman Sims.
Here.
Alderman Weggie. Mayor Thornton.
Here. Thank you. Item number 3 on tonight's agenda is the approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes or additions to tonight's agenda? Any objection to approval by acclamation?
Here.
Oh, Alderman Kramer.
A question, Your Honor. We have two tentative agendas. One has got the city on the top and one does not. They're both a little different.
If you take a look at page 2, Bill 6137 is added on the updated agenda. We're on the first agenda.
The one in my waistband?
With the city on the top.
Yeah, the one that reads City of Brentwood, but
I have 6137 on both, but one's got a little bit
I think it was just renumbered.
more explanation to it. Maybe that's a larger title, I can't tell.
that's the only thing I noticed different on what I had.
The one with the entire title to Bill number 6137 would be the one that would be our draft, or our final copy
Okay.
tonight.
All right.
Thank you.
Any objection to approving that one by acclamation? Seeing none, it will be so approved. Item number 4 on the agenda, consideration and approval of minutes. Item A is the board meeting minutes from June 5th of 2017. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, any objection to approval by acclamation? Seeing none, they're so approved. Item 4B, the minutes from June 19, 2017. Any changes or additions to those minutes?
Can we just note the fact that I made a really strong effort to be here but couldn't make it?
It has been duly noted that Alderman Plufka went to great lengths to try to attend remotely, and I'll further add that it's the mayor's fault that he wasn't able to do so.
Thank you.
There you go. Any objection to approving them by acclamation? Seeing none, they'll be so approved. Item number 5 on the agenda. Tonight we have with us our accountants. And I think Karen is here to introduce them, and then they're going to give us some information on how we did last year.
Yes, we will have Jacob Myers here from Daniel Jones and Associates, and he presented to the Ways and Means Committee last week. They had some questions. I believe he got them answered, and in case you didn't, I didn't catch you, I think you had the draft in your packet. You now have the final audit. It doesn't have the pretty colored picture yet, but you will get one. That's what it'll look like. And I just want to personally thank Jacob and Daniel Jones and Associates, as well as we had Bot Steel, because they were a big help for me, and they told it like it is. And so with that, I will turn it over to Jacob to present and then answer any questions you may have, or if you have any of me too. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer.
Well, on behalf of Daniel Jones and Associates, first I just want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to audit the city for the first time this year. I also want to thank Karen and all of the city staff. They were amazing to work with, and they answered our many requests that we threw their way. We as auditors are to look at the city and issue opinions as to whether or not the city's financial statements have been presented fairly in all material respects, have any material misstatements in their financial data, and report on internal controls. The only difference, the main difference between the draft that was handed to you beforehand and this final actually goes back to the Ways and Means Committee meeting. A question was asked on page 46.
Of the draft or the final?
Of the final and the draft. I'm just going to tell you what the change was. The only major change between the two, before, the state only allowed 12.5% of operating revenues to come from fines, fees, but as you probably have heard, the Supreme Court just kind of revised that so that it didn't target St. Louis County, and now that's back up to the 20%. So that was the only major change between the final and the draft. Just wanted to throw that out there before we go on. We have issued opinions on pages 1 of the CAFR and page 1 of the internal control report. For the opinion on page 1 in the CAFR, the city received an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is the highest opinion that a city can receive. The opinion on page 1 of the internal control report discusses how the city is in compliance with internal controls and that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. There was one finding noted on page 3 of the internal control and compliance report. This finding discussed how the city needs to document their risk assessment procedures further. This is a common finding. It is not stating that the city does not assess risk or address internal controls. We're simply stating that the city needs to have more documentation with regards to this process. FYI, this year the city did not go over the $750,000 single audit threshold, so you're not going to see that as you've seen in past years. That has to do with the federal funding requirements of needing that single audit. But I wanted to bring that to your attention so in years future, if you get big federal grants, you're going to know that you still need to have one of those single audits. In closing, I would again like to thank you all for giving us this opportunity and be willing to answer any questions you may have about the CAFR, the audit process, or the internal control report.
Are there any questions for Mr. Myers? Alderman Leahy.
Thank you. Jacob, I'm looking at the Daniel Jones and Associates. I'm going to work with the final papers. In your second paragraph, you established that due to the inherent limitations of internal controls, you all didn't get to do a full audit of all the internal controls, because that was not really within the scope of what you all were told or asked to do. What would it take to get to a full internal audit of the controls? How much of a step up would we have to take?
This is actually, it's a standard when it comes to financial audit procedures. And it's not saying that we didn't audit internal controls, but it's simply stating we can't, So in order to take that next step, really, my suggestion would be if you had a specific area of concern with internal controls, you would look at it at that specific area of concern.
Your Honor, if I may follow up.
Sure.
My question, I guess, would go to Lisa, and because of the city administrator not being able to be here, I don't anticipate an answer to the question.
You might direct it to Karen.
Okay. In the last 15, 16 years, I am not aware of the city doing a full internal audit control. And I'm curious if we might want to look at doing it, because I can't recall that we ever have. We've always had
The external
disclaimer,
audit function.
and based on everything we've looked at this point, it looks fairly good, but we've never really been hired to do the full. And my question is can somebody give us an idea when the last time full internal controls were done? Because I don't know that we have ever done it in my term.
Yeah, and I apologize, I do not have an answer for that. I don't know if Karen can elaborate on that or not, so.
I do know the state came and did an audit.
State did an audit, yes, but
So-
nothing on internal controls.
So my question to you, Jacob, in your experience of state audits, what is involved that would relate to internal controls?
Gotcha. Well, the state audit is looking at compliance stuff. They look at all transactions and relate it back to the statutes for a whole year. It's going to give you a pretty good idea if there's anything that's not following state statute. When it comes to internal controls, it is something that you can evaluate, but it's usually pretty extensive. That's why I would normally suggest if you had an area of concern to tackle that position first. But I know that the city definitely has presented to us at least a pretty extensive internal control document where they've documented a lot of the internal controls. We tested those while we were here, but to actually dig through and evaluate each internal control, that'd be a specialized engagement. It would all depend on what the city wanted, that kind of thing.
And I just have one other question. Could possibly be really expensive, correct? Because it is way more detailed of an audit.
Right.
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 Yes, and that's part of the reason why the city just didn't jump and say, let's go do it. When the state did their audit, they recommended that we look at it, and I know staff worked really, really hard trying to put some in. And we developed, but we've never gone and said, okay, how good are we? And are we following the practices that we did set up? Type thing. Your review says, relatively, you guys are doing pretty good, but we never really looked it to the nth degree, so
We-
we can't go down that avenue.
Yeah, we did a sampling, so we pulled 40 transactions and examined those for the controls you have in place to make sure that those randomly selected 40 were following the internal controls. But if you were to look at every transaction, that'd obviously be a different story.
Thank you.
Also, can I just add one thing? The audit finding that they had on the fraud, as Jacob explained it to me, that's tying looking for areas that might be fraud and tying it back into our internal control. Just because we have the internal control, now we need to identify areas of possible fraud and then show how we can tie it back into the control, what we have in place to keep that fraud from happening. That's what I've got to deal with as a result of this audit. So I think that kind of helps.
I'm very comfortable with what the city and the staff are doing
Right.
in order to control the citizens' money and make it work. And I have no criticism of it.
Right.
But in my terms, we've never
Right.
really gone that deep. And I'm just curious, and I know, yes, everybody says it's a lot more expensive, but we've never stepped up to it.
Right, right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Jacob, on page 42 of the comprehensive annual financial, that first paragraph there, could you explain that to a guy that doesn't balance his checkbook? Is that a concern?
No, it's pretty standard. So you guys have an other post-employment benefit plan. And in the process of having that plan, you pay an actuary to come up with a lot of numbers to say, if you look way into the future, how long everybody's going to live and everything, they come up with a liability amount that you could potentially have to pay out in the future. And they came up with that number, that $1,375,000. So based on the number of retirees and how many more retirees you're going to have over the years, they come up with that information. And your next valuation will be January 1st, 2018. It's once every 3 years. But essentially, that's what it's saying. The actuarial accrued liability for benefits was $1.375 million. And that's saying that if you do an analysis right now, looking to the future, that's potentially what the city could owe in unfunded portion of the OPEB.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6 on the agenda, we have a public hearing this evening, and I'm going to go ahead and gavel in the public hearing on text amendment number 17-06. Would any member of the public care to come forward and address the board regarding text amendment number 1706 regarding storage containers? Anyone? Yes.
No, it's not for the special use permit, that's under my report.
What's that? This is for the,
Yeah, this is just for the text.
for the text amendment,
I
right?
believe he's probably here for the.
containers,
Yeah, for
yeah, outside
Target
of Target.
specifically.
Yep.
That's under my report
Okay.
later in the agenda.
So we don't even know.
You're a member of the public if you want to speak. I'm not sure what you're here to speak about, so.
Yeah, I'm here to speak about the storage containers that we're gonna need outside of Target.
But you're not here to talk about the text amendment?
No.
Okay. Well, then probably wait.
We'll wait.
Yeah.
Sorry for the confusion.
Anybody here to talk about the text amendment regarding storage containers as opposed to the special use permit that I think we've covered? Yeah, sorry, we're just really confusing. All right, well, I'm going to close the public hearing if we don't have anybody here. And we'll move along. We don't have any bids this evening, item number 7. And item number 8 on our agenda is the hearing of any matter of public interest upon the request of any person present. If anyone here would like to come forward and address the board on any subject, you can step forward and you'll be given 3 minutes to do so. Anyone? No text amendment, no public interest. All right. We don't have any unfinished business this evening, which will move us right into item number 10 on the agenda, which is bills to be given a first reading. First bill is Bill 10A, Bill number 6143. Mr. City Attorney, can we have first reading by title only, please?
Yes, sir. Bill number 6143, first reading, an ordinance of the city of Brentwood, Missouri, approving an intergovernmental agreement for senior citizen recreation programming services with the city of Richmond Heights.
Thank you. Alderman Kramer, do you have a synopsis, please?
Surely, Your Honor. A little greater detail for Bill number 6143, the intergovernmental agreement for senior citizens recreation programming services. Our Parks and Recreation Department is recommending entering into a shared agreement for shared programming services with Richmond Heights. Due to a staff vacancy, conversation has been held with the City of Richmond Heights about merging senior programming. Richmond Heights would be responsible for planning and providing all programming services for trips, programs, classes, and special events geared toward senior citizens, while Brentwood would be responsible for providing reimbursement for 50% of recreation programmers' salary and benefits to Richmond Heights. The two cities would share the net revenue generated by the senior citizen recreation programming services item contained in bill language 6143.
Thank you. And I believe Director Grunenfelder is here to give us a little more information on this bill.
Good evening. So as the synopsis states, we are recommending entering into this agreement for shared programming services. In February, Tammy Bumgarner left. She put in her resignation. And so, honestly, prior to that, Teresa, who's the director at the City of Richmond Heights, and I have been talking about kind of the issues we both had with senior programming. I think Tammy had been a wonderful ambassador for us for senior programming. And the seniors loved her. She's been doing a wonderful job. And her primary responsibility was trying to grow senior programming. And she'd done, as much as gotten some great excitement, she'd only really grew the programming kind of incrementally. And so when she left, we kind of talked about it a little bit more and thought that this would be a good route to go. Sidebar, if the Richmond Heights programmer were left, we'd probably just reverse it. We'd be coming back to here saying we'd be taking on the role and vice versa. It's just kind of the way the ball rolled. And beyond that, we talked at Public Works about maybe trying, since it's a three city study, I was asked to go back and talk to them about maybe doing a third. In those conversations, the talk was that when really Richmond Heights considers their agreement with Maplewood as a one department, and everything we do is departmentally. So everything else that we do with them, when we do special events with them, we split everything 50-50. Revenue and expenditures, even though they're Richmond Heights and Maplewood as well. So to keep everything consistent, we wanted to keep it with 50-50. So that's why we're bringing everything back that way. So that is what we're doing. And like I said, at Public Works, it was a motion was made and moved forward with a 3-1 vote.
Any questions?
I have one.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
At present, all of the trips from Brentwood are on Friday because of the bus schedule. Does this mean that Richmond Heights would have a bus and trips could be any day of the week?
Yeah, we're working with them. If this got approved, obviously their staff person would have some latitude on when trips would be arranged. We want to make sure that it's good for everyone, but I think some of that would be dependent on their schedule as well.
Thank you.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Eric, it looks like our bus and our driver will be used like a backup. Correct. Is that bus and the driver used for any other purposes besides the senior program? Currently not right now. So that we would have some availability, and honestly, we have more than one driver. And part of the agreement states if we do use the driver, that cost is reimbursed back to the city of Brentwood. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Leahy.
Thank you. Eric, I'm the one at Public Works that raised the question about the three-city arrangement. Richmond Heights charges Maplewood to run their rec center, or their rec program. So they are running part of the brochures, part of the programming and everything, so that Maplewood does get to have input into what we do as a three-partner arrangement. But their discussion with you is, since it's all really the Richmond Heights staff that's doing it, we should just make it a 50-50, and Maplewood gets charged their set fee from Richmond Heights to run the program. But they get the benefit of being part of the program.
No, what it is that basically it's one department. Richmond Heights and Maplewood is one department, and so everything that we do with them is one department versus our department. So when we run all of our special events with them, we split revenue and expenditures 50-50. And so to kind of keep things consistent, we'd like to remain that 50-50 split instead of trying to make this agreement a third and everything else 50-50.
I thank you for having the conversation with them.
Sure.
I will support your request to combine the services.
Eric, can I ask you a follow-up on that? So,
Sure.
so am I understanding you correctly that the city of Maplewood doesn't have a Parks and Recs department per se? They share one with Richmond Heights, is that?
Correct. Richmond Heights actually runs their Parks and Recreation department for them.
So they outsource it to Richmond
Correct.
Heights?
But they get a benefit of being part of the three communities.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't aware of that, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. All right, good.
Let's see, that's first reading only, so we can move on to bill number 6144, which is labeled item number 11, but I'm going to call it 10B if we're doing first reading. It's still first reading, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So, bill number 6144, we'll call it 10B or 11. Mr. City Attorney, can we have first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6144, first reading, an ordinance repealing Article 1 and Article 5 of Chapter 400 and Article 1 of Chapter 500 of the Brentwood City Code concerning temporary use of storage containers and trailers in commercial and industrial districts.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, but I believe that should be amending, not repealing Article 1 and Article 5.
Trash can for me.
Yes, sir. I believe that is correct.
So it's amending?
Yes, sir.
Right there, instead of repealing.
All right. Okay, Alderman Kramer, do you have a synopsis?
I do, Your Honor. Bill 6144, the text amendments to Chapter 400 zoning, Section 400.020, the definition of a special use, Section 400.1950 to add supplemental regulations for temporary storage containers and trailers in commercial and industrial districts, and Section 500.030 to require storage containers and trailers on job sites to be stored within the construction fenced area. Further, the Public Works Committee has requested staff research regulatory and procedural solutions to better regulate the use of temporary storage containers and trailers in the commercial and industrial districts in our city of Brentwood. The committee directed staff to forward proposed text amendments to Chapter 400 of the City Zoning Code to our Planning and Zoning Commission for their review and consideration. At their June 14th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, the commission recommended by a vote of 9-0 the approval of the text amendments to Section 400.020 to amend the definition of a special use related to temporary storage containers and trailers, and 400.1950 to include requirements for the placement of storage containers and trailers in commercial and industrial districts. Our Public Works Committee also recommends the board amend Section 500.030, job site, to include the storage containers and trailers on job sites must be stored within a construction fenced area. This is all part of the language of Bill 6144.
All right, thank you. Director Kirkemeyer.
So, again, as it was stated, the Public Works Committee wanted staff to research a little bit more what we could do in terms of when we get requests for storage containers and trailers in commercial and industrial districts, how we should be processing them, should there be any additional requirements that we should possibly review and look at. So, again, this proceeded then through Public Works and on through Planning and Zoning Commission. So this is our recommendations this evening, these text amendments. Generally, staff is requested to bring storage containers and trailers onto sites for one of two reasons. One is, for example, the big box stores Bed Bath & Beyond, Target, when they're having maybe a special promotion and they have an overflow of store inventory for a particular time, they come in and request a special use permit. So we did have an amendment here that would amend the special use permit, but just to clarify when a special use permit is required, and also that any special use permits that involve a request for storage containers or trailers will come before the Board of Aldermen for review and approval. As it was currently written, the existing code requirement is that the planning director could do that at, their discretion. So I think, again, because of the nature of that request, all of those should come before the Board of Aldermen. So that's what the one text amendment was for. The other case that we have is when businesses might be undergoing some remodeling work or something, just again, like Target has just finished a remodeling project for inside the store, and they need storage containers and trailers just on the job site, again, for just a temporary use, temporary time period, and that's just to store really their maybe building materials, tools, things like that. So the way that is issued right now, the way the code is set up, is that those permits can be authorized by the Director of Planning just as a building permit issuance process. So again, staff is not really requesting that process change. They still would be processed in that manner. And the only exception to that is that we did change the job site that referenced to Chapter 500.030 to require that if they are going to be pulling storage containers and trailers on construction sites, that they be fenced with some type of privacy fencing, which is what Target did when they completed their most recent remodel. So that's really, we're going to process the things exactly the way we do now. Those text amendments are just for clarification. The only thing that's new that we're recommending is that under supplemental regulations, under section 400.1950 be added. And what that consists of is just coming up with several considerations. So either if it's the Board of Aldermen that are reviewing it for the reasons for a special use permit, or whether it's myself that's reviewing this request as part of construction activity, that we just have these 14 different regulations we can look at. They may or may not all apply. It's going to be kind of on a case-by-case basis. But I think that would help both of us to give us more guidance as to anything that we would want to stipulate as part of that approval process. So, like I said, there's 14 different requirements there. I think they're all probably pretty self-explanatory, but that's really what the amendments consist of this evening.
Thank you. Are there any questions about the text amendment? Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor. I have followed this topic for a while, and I know you and I have shared some comments about some of the storage container areas that have found their way into our city. And going back in time, there was I guess it was a requirement more than, I guess it was part of the code, and we changed the code, I'm not sure, regarding Board of Aldermen oversight for the storage containers. That was kind of relaxed, and now it's reinstituted without a shell. It's a may still, is that right?
This would be a shell now.
In
but
each
they would-
in each of
they
the
would
cases?
come. Mhm.
Okay. When we visited about this topic in the past, one of the things that we were concerned about was those Fortune 500 companies that have such a vast amount of funding that they were not worried about our existing penalty. Were they to continue to have storage containers on site after a deadline, or simply placing them on without permission? Do we have anything that addresses the penalty topic?
The penalties are already in place, and we did have to exercise those last year with a particular company. And when we took it to court, we were able to impose a fine. So I don't think we need to change what we have. I think we just need to enforce it when those situations do arise.
Okay. And then finally, Your Honor, most recently we had the example of the height of that fenced area in front of the storage containers. In the example that we saw recently, the storage container was up here and the fence was maybe 66% height I guess from down low, you couldn't really tell, but up on high, especially on Highway 40, you could see it was. Is that adjustable? Is that something we can, so that the fence matches the height of the storage container?
You could look at that. The way I look at it, though, is that the construction fencing, privacy fencing, probably isn't going to be something that we can completely hide something.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if that really, well, I guess that's my opinion. I'm not sure if that's really our objective. I think a lot of it is just when you put the fencing around it, it helps to just demarcate what the job site is, or again, even if it's for inventory and so forth. And it just keeps it a more pleasant appearance. It may not, again, camouflage or disguise everything, but I think it's a lot better than what we had, just exposing them completely to the open. And again, it kind of helps contain and identify the site, so where they're supposed to be placed.
Thank you. Your Honor, I see these as beneficial enhancements. I look forward to seeing how they work out. Perhaps we can make them stronger in the future if we need to.
Thank you. Any further questions? I just had one. So if I understood Alderman Kramer correctly, I do recall we went from it being a board action to I don't remember what the procedure was exactly, but there was no board action required to put storage containers in. It was essentially an administrative action? Is that's changing now? We're going back to the board?
So the only thing that will definitely come before the Board of Aldermen is a special use permit for just the storage containers and trailers. So it wouldn't be for all special use permits. It would just be for those. That's what this amendment says.
Okay.
But before, the way the code was written is any special use permits of any kind, including storage containers and trailers, could be approved by the director or at their discretion be forwarded to the
Gotcha.
board
Okay.
for review and approval.
So this makes it mandatory for these types to
For
come?
just the
but-
containers.
Gotcha.
And again, it's, we got to see if this works.
Sure.
And so.
Alderman Leahy.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm still hung up with why we're removing the discretionary power of staff and making it a Board of Aldermen decision. I'm not aware of an incident where staff made a decision that had an adverse effect on the city of Brentwood. And I'm not really so sure that we want to be looking over the shoulder that heavily on storage containers. So am I missing an incident that took place that I'm not aware of? Because I'm just really not comfortable with going, yeah, Board of Aldermen, anytime it wants to bring in a storage container, you guys have to approve it. I'm not so sure that that's a good solution.
So I think, again, through this process, that's what I was picking up was that those types, again, should come before this board. And I guess it's just been more, because it's been at the discretion, I think my predecessors have always taken storage containers and trailers to this board. So it's almost been just done that way. So again, it was just making the code, amending the code, so that would be the
I can
procedure
recall
we
when
follow.
Target did a remodeling, and when Bed Bath & Beyond started their special sale. We had a 10 trailer brung in, and the only real hiccup with it was, could we stack them too high? And we authorized to let them stack too high. But as a discretionary power, I'm still very comfortable with staff reviewing and deciding. And when they have I'm not really too sure, bring it to me as you feel like, yeah, maybe this one is a little touchy. But regularly, I like what staff's been doing. I don't think we should be taking that control away from them.
Alderman Kramer?
Your Honor, I know you didn't want this to turn into a point-counterpoint.
Well, I mean, I'll renew my admonishment to the board. If you have a question, ask a question. There'll be ample time for debating. This should be to elicit factual information, not the pre-debate.
Yeah. And
So,
the question on the floor is, I'm not aware of a
yeah,
problem that we really had.
Your
So
question
maybe-
was, is there an incident that you weren't aware of that has
Yeah.
generated sort of this? And I think Lisa's response is, no, we're sort of codifying the way we've always done it.
Okay.
That
That's correct.
sounds about right.
So can I answer a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. And I certainly respect Alderman Leahy's viewpoint. we have had an extended history on this topic, which included Walgreens, for
Yes.
example. And I think that there were instances where, for example, staff was told one thing and another thing happened. I think there were instances where staff was caught off guard and there were surprises. This is such a large item, and the reason why it's such a large item is we put, well, this is kind of answering the question. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I'm trying not to lobby here.
Sorry?
We put such a responsibility on the shoulders of planning and zoning to help our commercial districts look the way that they do. When we have a commercial enterprise kind of go around what they've already received an approval for in terms of construction size or building footprint and storage availability and storage ability to do things on their own on a regular basis, I think it's up to the Board of Aldermen to know about that and to have a chance to say yes or no. We have said yes, and we have said no in the past. So I think there are circumstances in the past, to answer your question, where there's enough gravity to bring this, I guess, enhancement back for our consideration, and look forward to the debate.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. We will move along to what I'm going to call item 10C, but it looks like it's item number 11 on the agenda we're currently following. So, or sorry, 12 on the item agenda that we're currently following. I'm going to say at the outset that this is my understanding is this is a housekeeping measure. This is a bill that we pass annually to essentially reinstitute our code. So without further ado, Mr. City Attorney, could we have Bill 6145 by title only, please?
Bill number 6145, first reading, an ordinance adopting and enacting a new code of ordinances of the city of Brentwood, establishing the same, providing for the repeal of certain ordinances not included therein, except as herein expressly provided, providing for the manner of amending such code of ordinances, providing penalty for the violation thereof, and providing when this ordinance shall become effective.
All right, Alderman Kramer, do you have synopsis?
Surely, Your Honor. Bill number 6145, aside from the title, periodically the city works with the general code to update the City of Brentwood Code of Ordinances to make sure that the city's code requirements are compliant with revised Missouri statutes, the state statutes of the state of Missouri. This ordinance adopts any amendments to the code that would be required following the general review of the code. And I think that's it.
All right, and let's see. Are there any questions about this one? I'll pick, I didn't want to put anybody in particular down because your questions, depending on what they are, could go to just about anybody, but the city attorney would be the most likely place to have them end up, but if we don't have any, then, everybody cool with this? Okay, we'll move along. Let's see, we are on 10D, which is, well, now we've run out of numbers. We're just going to go by the bill number. It's bill number 6137. Mr. City Attorney, could we have bill number 6137, first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6137, first reading, an ordinance to enable the city of Brentwood, Missouri to join the Missouri Clean Energy District.
All right, Alderman Kramer, synopsis, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Bill number 6137, first reading, covering the request to join the Missouri Clean Energy District, MCED. That's pursuant to the Property Assessment Clean Energy Act, stating the terms under which the city of Brentwood will conduct activities as a member of such district and approving a related cooperative agreement. It's a statewide political subdivision which is established to provide unlimited capital to fund energy efficiency and renewable projects. Property owners, both public and private, within member communities may apply for financing. Property Assessed Clean Energy, or PACE, serves as a financing tool that allows property owners to borrow money for renewable energy and energy efficiency property improvements with no upfront costs. The MCED has arranged for Missouri counties and municipalities to join the district with no cost of membership, liability, or administrative burden. Missouri state statute requires local municipalities to participate in a clean energy district for the municipalities to take advantage of that PACE financing. The MCED program was discussed at our Public Works Committee meeting recently. Public Works Committee recommends the full Board of Aldermen consider taking part and the approval of the MCED program as spelled out in Bill number 6137.
All right, thank you. And I understand that Director Gummersheimer is here to tell us a little more about this one.
Get the right page. Okay. If you recall, back in April of 2017, we had a similar program. It was Ordinance 4772, and that one in particular was the Show Me Pace Clean Energy District. This is pretty similar to that. It's just a different district. It's same thing. It's some of these are some of the communities that are participating in this one are some of the same ones that participated in Show Me Pace. So Chesterfield, Ellisville, Maryland Heights, Olivet, Town and Country. There's several other ones that are listed on their website, but basically the property owners, as mentioned in the synopsis, public, private, any of those memberships within those communities can apply for the financing. It's all property assessed clean energy, which actually your taxes help pay for that 100% funding up front. It's basically a financing tool that allows the property owners to borrow the money for the renewable energy or energy efficiency improvements. Some of the improvements would include new HVAC units, lighting improvements, solar, water pumps, insulation, almost any improvement that can be affixed to a commercial or residential property, whether it's large or small. It goes through the approval process similar to Show Me Pace. The one thing I know that's a little bit different, this MCED has a program called HERO, which is an acronym for Home Energy Renovation Opportunity. And again, it's pretty similar as far as what it allow as far as energy efficiency improvements. It's slightly different in the sense that the approval is primarily based on the home equity and debt payment history rather than a FICO score. And the HERO program finances 100% of the cost to purchase and install the eligible improvements. The fixed rates and flexible terms, I'm not sure what the interest rate is, but the terms are typically 5 to 20 years. Usually it's based on the usefulness of the equipment you're putting in. And then should you decide to sell your property before the HERO assessment is paid in full, any remaining balance may be able to transfer to that new property owner, whether it's commercial or residential. And as mentioned in the synopsis, the financing comes through private funds. It's repaid on an annual property assessment. The property owners can finance 100% of the project. It doesn't cost the city anything to administer or manage. And as it was mentioned, we've got Bill 6137 if the board approves it. That's it.
Are there any questions for Director Dan? Sounds like we got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Let's see, we don't have any bills to be given a second reading only this evening. We have a number of bills for first and second reading, so we're going to move down to item 12 on the agenda, which is, item 14 on the agenda, which is bill number 6136. Mr. City Attorney, can we have first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6136, first reading, an ordinance approving and authorizing execution of an agreement with Missouri American Water Company, hereinafter referred to as the utility.
Alderman Kramer, more about the utility, please?
Yes, sir, Your Honor. This is our first and second reading covering Bill 6136, the agreement with Missouri American Water Company for the installation of advanced water metering facilities. That company is requesting approval of an agreement with the city of Brentwood to install advanced metering equipment, network communications devices, including but not limited to data collector units, or DCUs, antennae and/or radio frequency control local area network range extenders, and other advanced meter facilities that in connection with and necessary for the utility's operation, transmission, and distribution of water supplies within St. Louis County. The installation of the advanced water meter facilities will be limited to the existing emergency siren at the City Hall here and a location owned by the Brentwood School District in order to reduce the number of new advanced meter facility installations within the City of Brentwood's right-of-way. This is Bill number 6136.
Thank you. And I believe Dan's got this one as well. Tell us a little more about advanced meters.
As was mentioned in the synopsis, on the northwest corner of the City Hall building, there's a wooden pole. On that wooden pole is emergency services. I believe it's an emergency siren. This would mount to that same pole. The device is approximately 150 pounds. It doesn't do anything bad to the pole. It's just basically a friction coupling that wraps around it. The DCU, or data controller unit, will allow them to use telemetry to pull from this side of town. They're also putting one at the Brentwood School District back in Hanley Industrial Court. And what that allowed them to do is collect all their data at once rather than take multiple cycles. And it'll basically give them as most accurate reading as they can possibly get. It won't cost us anything. They'll maintain it. There's a hold harmless agreement. Anytime they have to replace any of the stainless steel banding, the antenna boom, any of those features, that's all at their cost. The agreement allows them to get ingress egress to our property since they'd have to cross over the property line. Again, it doesn't cost us anything. The term of the agreement's 20 years from the effective date of the signing of the agreement. They've given us the structural calculations. I believe it's either a 90 or 100 mile per hour wind load that the thing can sustain. It's all signed PE drawings and calculations, so everything seemed in order. And again, it went through the Public Works Committee, and don't think there were any objections.
Are there any questions for Director? Andy Leahy.
Dan, at Public Works, we asked about the ownership of that pole. I'm under the impression it belongs to St. Louis County, not to the city of Brentwood.
Right.
We're going to double check that for us.
Yeah, that's what we wound up looking up, and it is the county's.
County. By making this agreement, do we have to let the county know that we're attaching something to their pool?
They already know. They're part of this group.
So
and
we're not-
Missouri American notified them, yeah.
Thank you. That was all I wanted.
Yep.
Any further questions? Seeing none, Mr. City Attorney, can we have second reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6136, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance approving and authorizing execution of an agreement with Missouri American Water Company, hereinafter referred to as the utility.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion to perfect Bill 6136 into ordinance form, please.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board perfect Bill number 6136 into ordinance form. Is there any discussion? Seeing none.
We call a question, sorry.
Yeah, seeing none. We'll have a roll call, please.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Leahy?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Bill number 6136 is hereby passed upon signature of the mayor, becomes ordinance 4786.
All right, and that leads us to item 14B. Mr. City Attorney, can we have the bill number 6140 by title only, please?
Bill number 6140, first reading, an ordinance of the city of Brentwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and/or city administrator to enter into and execute a consultant services agreement between the city of Brentwood, Missouri and Kevin Boschert, and providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
All right, thank you. Alderman Kramer, can we have a synopsis, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Bill number 6140. This covers the agreement for the professional services in order to provide services of an accreditation manager. Our city is taking part in the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, otherwise known as CALEA, and is nearing the midpoint of those accreditation processes. Per CALEA standards, an agency must identify an accreditation manager. Interim Police Chief Jim McIntyre was assigned to be the city's accreditation manager, but has since been reassigned to serve as interim police chief. This bill would authorize the mayor and/or city administrator to enter into and execute a consultation services agreement between the city of Brentwood and Kevin Boschert in order to provide those essential duties of the city's accreditation manager for CALEA. This is bill number 6140.
All right, thank you. And I thought I saw Chief McIntyre in the audience. Come on up and tell us what you know about this one.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. As the synopsis indicated, CALEA requires us to identify an accreditation manager. On August 1st, 2016, we signed our contract with the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. That contract runs for 3 years, so our contract to be accredited is July 31st, 2019. In that time, since we signed our contract, I was publishing about 6 policies a month. We're down to about 1 or 2 a month now because of the absence of our former chief. So we've reached out to our consultant that we had with the Fitch Group, and they identified Mr. Boschert as a former accreditation manager. He led the Florissant Police Department through 2 accreditation cycles, and because of the fact that our consultant with the Fitch Group is a former police officer from Florissant, Mr. Boschert is a former police officer from Florissant. The two of them know each other. They actually worked on Kalia together. Kind of helps us because the Fitch group, pretty much, they know our policies as well as I do because I bounce everything off of them before we publish anything. So the fact that we're on a time, we're on a clock, and we're about, well, now we're nearly 60% through with our directives, with our policies, but we also were required to proof those policies. What that means is we have to require proof of everything that we say we do. We have to show that we're doing what we say we're doing. Now, I've been doing a lot of that, but after May 5th, that's pretty much stopped. The proofing has anyway. It's just, it's very time consuming.
For those of you who don't know, Jim started a lengthy vacation on May 5th. He just got back and hasn't had time to do anything else except enjoy himself since that time. So, are there any questions? Alderman Pluff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, prior to receiving accreditation from CLIA, will you take the department through a mock audit process?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Will Mr. Boschert, how will he help you, or to what extent will he help you prepare for that process?
He'll prepare the directives, prepare the proofs. Because he's brought his agency through not only two mocks, but he also participated in mocks from other agencies, so he knows what to expect and what we need to do. We've already, with our consultant, identified some of the things that we need to do, but Mr. Boschert will walk hand in hand with us through that particular process.
So as important as it would be to prepare for that audit, he'll be more helpful after the audit, after the mock audit, you think?
Correct. Once we find out what we need to fix, what they expect, what our mock assessors expect Kalia to tell us what to fix, that's when we get working on that.
So how far in advance of the actual audit does the mock audit, or at least one of the mock audits, take place?
Generally, before 6 months, before your actual audit, you want to have one. Generally speaking, so 6 to 9 months. Something like that.
So where we sit today, given the fact that you've been handed other duties and that the accreditation process has slowed down, admittedly, in the wake of that, the hiring of this person in your mind will help us get us on track from a timing standpoint?
Oh, undoubtedly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Leahy?
Couple of questions, if I can, to the interim chief. Sure. First of all, no, not in the contract nor in the ordinance that I'm looking at do we discuss what the total value of this service is going to run. Is that contractually established, or are we going to just stay with the 25 hours a week?
I think it's contractually established.
It's not on any of the 4 pages that I have. No, that just establishes
Mr.
that he
City
will not
Attorney,
exceed 25
you're
hours
looking
a
a bit confused, so do you have?
Is there a gross total amount for the value of this contract?
No, there's an hourly
Rate.
rate and a not to exceed hours per week.
Yes, but it doesn't tell me how much are we agreeing to spend. How do we budget in this?
I would assume you'd budget as if they spent 25 hours a week at $40 an hour, and if he spends less, you would save money. Because you can't spend more than that.
Okay.
Check me on this. I think what you're asking, though, is are we to assume that it's going to be 25 hours a week at $40 an hour for the entire year? Is that?
That is what the contract leads you to believe. My question is, what's our gross cost of what if, because we're not going to hire him part-time, we're going to get him to get us through.
Right.
Because we need that help, but do we have an estimate of what we're going to totally spend?
Jim?
And
Well, our accreditation, so basically to break it down, we have the mock that we're kind of shooting for maybe possibly at the end of this year, which puts us at about April for CLIA to arrive on site, which would put us about, the CLIA conferences run they're quarterly, so that would put us perhaps maybe in the summer conference of next year, perhaps. This is spitballing. But
best guess.
Yes, this is best estimates right now as I stand here. I'm looking at probably at least through next summer for sure in terms of getting our accreditation. The idea is we have till July of 2019.
Yep.
But we're shooting for 2018.
To make it work.
Correct.
So that's where the figure of 54,000 kind of floats out there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but there's nothing in these documents that limits me to that ceiling to work with.
If I may, it does. It limits the contractor to 25 hours a week at $40 an hour. So he can't do more than that computation per year.
Which, just for the record, is around $50,000 a year.
Right, and I would also add that the chief's cover memo on page 2, finance operation, middle of page 2, said that it is roughly $49,920, or $50,000 a year.
Yes, and that, in reading all the documents, I'm going, okay, should we literally put that in somewhere? Your impression is the 25 hours maximum per week is good enough. It defines.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Second question, if I may, on page 1 of the contract page. May be required to attend a CALIA, got it right, conference, and which the city's expense. Is that a requirement for the person to be the CALIA representative for the city, requiring them to be someplace? Or is this something of, yeah, I think it'd be good to have somebody go to a conference?
It's required that we attend a conference. I attended the conference last year in Charleston.
Okay,
However, I didn't attend the banquet, that's when you get your accreditation. But this year, former Chief Fitzgerald had suggested, not only suggested, but budgeted for me to attend the fall conference to stay all the way through to the banquet so that we could see what happens, because you sit in front of a panel of CALIA assessors, and they ask you questions because they have your report in front of them. So he suggested that we go to that.
okay. By doing that, I've obviously exceeded my 25 hours per week clause.
Okay?
And I'm going, are A and B in conflict with each other? That's where I was trying to get into, how do we budget and put a cap on the total cost of what we're doing?
I would respectfully suggest that our budgeting constraints are our problems. The contract defines the scope of work and type of compensation, and it's our responsibility to budget appropriately to cover that. I would think that if the chief intends for him to attend the conference, then in his budgeting for the year when he wishes this person to attend, he will accommodate that in the department's budget.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Your Honor.
Alderman Plefka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have a question, and one of Alderman Leahy's questions actually jogged my memory about it. In the version of CALIA that we are applying to be accredited by, there is a recertification process every 3 years or 4 years?
It's changed now. It's 4. We're locked into version 5 right now.
Right.
Which is every 3 years. Our next accreditation will be every 4 years.
Okay. Do you anticipate this consultant staying on, and that you will be budgeting for this kind of an expense on an ongoing basis as we continue to require ongoing accreditation? Or do you think that once we achieve accreditation, we'll be able to handle that ongoing re-accreditation or the ongoing accreditation internally?
In my opinion,
Yeah.
I believe you would need a separate accreditation manager just because of the volume of work. That CALIA looks at 25% of your policies in the new version every year.
So while this is right now a 25-hour consultant that's being hired on an ad hoc basis, do you envision a time where this might be somebody who might be an employee of the city of Brentwood that we would hire on a permanent basis because of the ongoing requirements of accreditation?
That would be something that would be beneficial to the police department and the city, yes.
Thank you. That's a question I had.
Any further questions? I just have one, Jim. Are any of these conferences held in Las Vegas?
Perhaps they are, sir, but not that I have seen. The next one's
Okay,
in,
well, if you'd let me know, I'd like to attend that one.
Jacksonville,
Yeah,
Florida.
absolutely, yeah. Thank you. Right.
Thanks, Chief.
Um,
Second?
That brings us to item 14.
Oh, we have a second
Oh,
reading.
sorry, second reading. Mr. City Attorney, could we have the second reading by title only, please?
Mr. Mayor, before second reading, it would be, the members of the board have received at their place an amended
Oh, right,
version of
an
the
amended
ordinance
version, right.
and of the contract. It changes the hours from 24 per week to 25.
Yes.
And changes the reference in the text of the bill to the amended version of the agreement dated 7/17/17. It will be appropriate to amend Bill 6140 by the version distributed and in hand of the board this evening.
Would anyone care to offer such an amendment?
Your Honor, I'll do that. Amend Bill 6140 to the revised Bill 6140, citing the change dated 7/17 and hours going from 24 to 25 max per week.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board approve the amendment to the bills as indicated by Alderman Leahy. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, great. Now,
Bill number 6140.
do we need to do a first and second of the amended bill? I'm
No,
sorry.
sir.
Okay, so,
Bill number 6140, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and/or city administrator to enter into and execute a consultant services agreement between the City of Brentwood, Missouri, and Kevin Boschert, providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
Your Honor, I'll move to perfect Bill 6140 revised into ordinance form.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded that the board perfect bill number 6140 as amended into ordinance form. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call, please.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Leahy?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Bill number 6140 is hereby passed as amended, and upon signature of the mayor, becomes ordinance 4787.
Okay, so now we get the police department certified.
All right, thank you. And that brings us to item 14C on the agenda, which is bill number 6141. Mr. City Attorney, could we have the first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6141, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and/or city administrator to enter into and execute a consultant services agreement between the City of Brentwood, Missouri, and the Center for Public Safety Management, LLC, and providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
Thank you. Alderman Kramer, synopsis?
Yes, Your Honor. A little greater detail for Bill 6141, the agreement for professional services that to provide professional service in assistance with the police chief search. Our city administrator has requested the human resources manager reach out to several search firms regarding a potential search for a new police chief for the city of Brentwood. Several firms were contacted. 4 of those responded. City administrator recommends the firm Center for Public Safety, CPSM LLC. This bill would authorize the mayor and their city administrator to enter into that agreement, execute it between the city and CPSM LLC. This is bill number 6141.
All right, thank you. And I think Jason Katz is here with some more information for the board on this one.
Good evening. Yes, the city administrator asked that I reach out to several different firms, which I did. The 4 firms that responded back were CPSM. Sorry, I put my glasses on. Slavin Management Consultants, the Mercer Group, and GovHR USA. We already had an established working relationship with CPSM, and as such, that was the ultimate decision on behalf of the city administrator, by which she asked me to put the memo together and kind of give a brief indication of where we were looking at. So I'm not sure what additional information you're wanting me to go into to detail. I do have all of the proposals put together by the various entities.
Well, we'll just see if there are any questions. Does anyone on the board have any questions for Jason? None? Thank you very much. Mr. City Attorney, could we have the second reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6141, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and/or city administrator to enter into and execute a consultant services agreement between the City of Brentwood, Missouri and the Center for Public Safety Management, LLC, and providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
All right, thank you. Would entertain a motion to perfect.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board perfect Bill number 6141 into ordinance form. Is there any discussion at this time? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call, please.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Leahy?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Bill 6141 is hereby passed and upon signature of the mayor becomes ordinance 4788.
All right, thank you. Item number 14D on tonight's agenda is Bill number 6142. Mr. City Attorney, can we have the first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6142, first reading, an ordinance granting amended site plan approval to Carboline for exterior A building addition and related site improvements at property numbered 350 Hanley Industrial Court, which permits under the provision of Chapter 400 of the Brentwood Code of Ordinances the development of that site, providing the conditions of such development, and providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
Thank you. Alderman Kramer, synopsis?
Yes, Your Honor, making progress. Our last synopsis of the evening, Bill number 6142, our first and second reading covering that site plan for Carboline Fire Test Building. The petitioner is proposing to add 5,906 fire test building square feet at 350 Hanley Industrial Court. Building would enhance the ability for Carboline to complete testing on-site instead of sending materials off-site for testing. Project was reviewed and recommended for approval by our Planning and Zoning Commission. Board of Aldermen approved the site plan back December 1st, 2014 via Ordinance 4593. However, the proposed fire test building was never constructed and the site plan review lapsed. The site plan was resubmitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission and they recommended approval of that site development plan by a vote of 9-0. This is Bill number 6142.
All right, thank you. I believe Lisa Kirkemeyer can answer questions from the board on this ordinance. Fairly self-explanatory. Anything you think the board needs to know?
I think it's probably wrapped up in the synopsis. So most of you have seen this before. I know there's some new faces. There is a representative from Carboline here if you have any other questions as well. So.
All right, seeing none, Mr. City Attorney, can we have the second reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6142, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance granting amended site plan approval for Carboline for exterior, a building addition, and related site improvements at property numbered 350 Hanley Industrial Court, which permits under the provisions of Chapter 400 of the Brentwood Code of Ordinances the development of that site, providing the conditions of such development, and providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
Your Honor, a motion to perfect Bill 6142 into ordinance form, please. Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board perfect Bill number 6142 into ordinance form. Is there any discussion of the bill? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call, please.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Leahy?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Bill number 6142 is hereby passed and upon signature of the mayor becomes ordinance 4789.
All right, thank you. Let's see, I am going to get everyone confused if I don't stay on the same agenda. Item number 15, we do not have any resolutions this evening. Item number 16 on the agenda, we have Alderwoman Sims for the warrant list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the pleasure of reviewing the warrant list in Mr. Dimmitt's absence, and I recommend approval of the amount of $529,848.81.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board approve the warrant list in the amount stated. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call, please.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes.
Alderman Leahy?
Yes, pay the bills.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Your Honor, if I may, I believe we did skip over the CID.
Coming up.
Oh,
Yeah, it's under the Planning and Development Report.
gotcha. I'm jumping. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so that brings us to reports of committees and departments. My report, I've got three things that I want to talk about this evening real quick. The first is, I don't know if many of you are aware of it, but we had a number of positions open in the police department, and we may still have them open, but we began searching for candidates to fill open positions in the police department. And it was recommended by CPSM and by Jason that we get some citizens involved in that process. And so I reached out to Ed Wright Jr. and asked him if he'd be willing to sit in on some of those panels and participate in that process, just as a one-time thing. And the idea is that when we have positions open, that we would reach out and tap somebody, kind of different each time, but at least it gives us a citizen's perspective on potential candidates and so on and so forth. I thought it was a really good idea. So I wanted to thank Mr. Wright for agreeing to do that. He participated. I think we have 3 open spots, if I'm not mistaken, Jason? 2? Yeah, two definitive and a potential third spot. So appreciate Ed's help doing that, and I think that was a really great idea. I'm glad to see that that's working out. Second thing I want to talk about is budgets, and I know this is everybody's favorite topic, but it's going to be time before we know it here to start getting serious about it. And I guess what I want to talk to the board about is, I've already seen emails flying around about various projects, and for lack of a better term, I'm going to call them pet projects. Okay, things that are in the interest of your constituents, and you're doing exactly what you ought to be doing, is bringing them and trying to kind of get them into the queue and so on and so forth. But I'm going to remind you all that we made a commitment earlier this year to sort of prioritize our expenditures, particularly as respects to capital expenditures. And I'm going to ask you all that as I don't want you by any means to not do the best you can by your constituents, but I think, it's going to require, as I said at that meeting, and I've probably said 100 times since, if I've said it once, it's going to take some teamwork to get these bigger things done. And that means that there's not going to be enough money in the budget for a lot of these other projects that I've seen, being bandied about, and whether it's a dog park or whether it's streets or curbs, sidewalks, trees, particular branch of vegetation that you want to see disappear. And I understand that these projects are important to you and important to your constituents and important to all of us, but there simply isn't enough money to do everything. And I'm going to ask for your help and remind you that we are going to be getting into those serious discussions here fairly soon, and to put on your conciliatory hats, because when it comes to prioritizing those things, we're going to be, really asking people to look at their budgets and cut and dedicate as much as they can to the bigger projects, which is, sort of the Manchester renewal, like we all decided. So I just, I want to kind of get out ahead of that. I know I'm probably jumping the gun a little bit, but I want to, it's really important that we do, if we're going to accomplish big things, it's important that we work together. And so that's what I'm trying to get out in front of and make sure that everybody's on the same page. And, if I have to, I'll ask for, special meetings with each of you to talk about your particular thing that you'd like to see happen and when we might be able to get that done and so on and so forth. But, I think as a starting point, the assumption of everybody should be that the bulk of the effort is going to go into these bigger projects, and there's just not going to be a lot left over for any commitments that we haven't already made. I'm certainly not talking about streets. We made a commitment to finish all of our streets, and we're going to do that next year just like we planned. But for some of these other things that haven't been done yet, and I know that some of them have been on the back burner for a while, you know what? Quite frankly, they're going to sit there a while longer. And that was one of the decisions that we made together, and I'm gonna kind of press everybody on that as we move through this budget cycle. So I just wanted to get that out in front and be real clear about it. The third thing is I want to talk a little bit about the police chief process. I've had a discussion with Bola and Jim McIntyre about how this is going to go, and I think we've discussed it at the board level to some extent. But with the approval of the bill bringing CPSM on board tonight, I want to thank the board for that support and then talk a little bit about how I envision things going. So, you know, what we will be doing is we'll be doing an open search for a police chief candidate. And what that means is it will be open to internal candidates as well as external candidates. And so, you know, people say a nationwide search. Well, yeah, it'll be open to anybody who, you know, is a U.S. citizen who is able to be employed by the city of Brentwood. So to that extent, it'll be nationwide. But one of the reasons that we're bringing CPSM on board to help us with that is to help us identify places where we might find, you know, candidates for the position, in addition to internal candidates and some local candidates that have been recommended by other municipalities or whatnot. So, you know, the idea is to cast the net as far and wide as we possibly can to get the best candidates available and then to develop a selection process by which we can get down to a candidate or candidates that we can then choose from. So that process, now that the board has provided the bill to fund it, can get started in earnest. We've already been working on it to some extent, but I think it's going to move a lot quicker now that we've kind of got the contract with CPSM on board to do it. One of the things, I don't know exactly how that process will run, but I wanted to make the board aware of a couple things that are going to be a part of that process that I already know. The first is that, as I said, it's going to be open to internal and external candidates, and Interim Chief McIntyre has expressed his interest in the position, and I'm very, very happy to have him be a part of that process. The other is that we will be involving citizens in that process as well. And again, that's consistent with the recommendations that we've already gotten from CPSM. So I've reached out. My plan is to do this. I want to appoint a police chief selection committee from the community. My plan is to appoint one person as a citizen at large, and then one person from each ward to represent their ward on that committee. In addition to that, I plan to appoint a person to represent the business community here in town, and then I plan to appoint one additional person to represent the religious community here in town. So I'm thinking that board would ultimately consist of 7 citizens, well, they'll all be citizens. One of them may or may not be from Brentwood. I think the business owner could possibly be from outside of Brentwood, but be a longstanding business person here. But either way, that group will then be fairly heavily involved in that selection process as we go along. And I think, like I said, that's consistent with the recommendations we got from CPSM, and I think it's absolutely consistent with what I'm hoping that we get out of this process, which is, you know, a police chief that can, you know, help us implement all of the wonderful suggestions that were made as part of CPSM's evaluation of the department. So anyway, that's as far as timing goes. You know, like I said, I think the ball's going to start rolling quite a bit faster now that we've got CPSM on board to get us going. The contract with them calls for them to not only help us identify candidates, but also help us develop the selection process and criteria that we'll use to winnow those candidates down. So I would look for us to be moving forward. I think if we are diligent and lucky, that we would be looking at winding up that process sometime around the end of the year, potentially, but that's by no means guaranteed. You know, the last thing I'll share with everybody is that the Missouri legislature last August passed a bill that essentially guarantees any police chief employment for life, but for, I think it's 13 enumerated reasons. And that being the case, you know, it becomes a little bit like getting married. And you certainly don't want to take that appointment lightly. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm taking that appointment as probably one of the most important things I'll do this year. And if we are not 100% sure that we have the right person in place to take that position and move forward, then I'm not inclined to do it. And so, it may be longer than that. I don't think that'll be the case, but I certainly am not going to guarantee to anybody that we will have a new police chief by the end of this year, come hell or high water, because it's very possible that, or it's not very possible, but it's possible that we could find ourselves, not getting exactly what we want and move further on than that. So I guess what I'm trying to say by saying that is that it's going to be a long process. I don't anticipate it getting over any sooner than the end of the year at the earliest. And it may not even get over at the beginning of the year, by the end of the year. So, I just want to set everybody's expectations fairly with respect to how I intend to go about making the appointment, and let the board know as we go. Question?
Yes, sir. You're going to work your citizens committee through. They're going to make a recommendation from the candidates to you. You will make an appointment, whether it's that person or someone else, to the board. And
Yeah.
the board will then confirm or consent or reject that appointment? Is
Yeah.
how you perceive the whole, the pattern to work?
Right. So under our Class 4 city statute, the appointment
is yours.
appointment is the mayor's to make with the advice and consent of the Board of Aldermen. So any choice that I make would ultimately have to come and be approved by you. As I've indicated, I've tried to bring the board along through this entire process, and in fact already have asked the board for help in approving the bill to bring CPSM in. So, my view is we're going to be working on this together, but at the end of the day, it's going to be my choice or my decision whether to appoint, whom to appoint, if anyone at all, and then to bring that to you and ask you to approve that selection. So, the Citizens Committee, I think, will be primarily a tool for Bola and I to use, but I intend to share the information that I get thereby extensively with the board as well. Because, let's face it, the last thing I want is to go through this lengthy and extended process and then have the board decide that they disagree with me. So, as with most things, I'm trying to bring everybody along as best we can, and so we have a good outcome at the end. So. Anyway, that's my report. Is there anybody else? Well, I'm sorry. Question?
Your Honor, if I could, under
Sure.
the mayor's report previously, just following up on some citizen questions.
Sure.
As warm as it has been, there's been a long vacant area there at the southwest corner of White and Brentwood. We've heard rumors of a frozen dessert provider going to be appearing there. Is that still on the drawing board?
It is, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, let me share with you what I can about that. So, well, yeah, okay. We'll take 2 minutes. Here's the long story short, folks. It was my desire to open a business there that was essentially what we call a walk-up restaurant without a drive-through. Unfortunately, that business plan is not tenable. And if you look around St. Louis at what's being built, you will find that there is no such thing as ice cream places being built without drive-throughs in this town right now. Any of the ones that you see that don't have drive-throughs were probably built quite some time ago. Example, Tasty Freeze over there on Big Bend. But everybody else has drive-throughs. And the reason is because the business plan is simply untenable. And really, it's a matter of economics. It costs too much today to build a commercial building for you to not maximize your revenue in that way. So I have adapted our plan to include a drive-through. I've had discussions with the Director of Planning and Development about the possibility of doing that, and I believe that we will make submission to the Planning and Zoning Commission next month. Like I said, it was my desire to do it without that, but unfortunately that's the only way it works. It does significantly change the thing, so we've had to go back to the drawing board and make some things. But based on discussions thus far with Lisa and everybody else who are involved, It looks like it will eventually hit planning and zoning next month, so stay tuned. So, yeah. So the barren lot, look, it's not going to stay a barren lot. If we're not able to do this particular development on it, then me and the fellow behind me are going to sell the property together, and there's buyers lined up. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So either way, it won't be vacant.
Thank you.
Okay. Public Safety Committee, Alderman Plefka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There'll be no meeting this Thursday. We will meet August 17th for the next time, and at which time we'll receive not only monthly reports, which we always receive from our Chief of Police and our Fire Chief, but we'll also receive, I believe, from our Director of Public Works, an Ameren Street Light Program proposal, at least, to involve the various addresses where we've identified a potential need for additional lighting on the streets. So when we get closer to that meeting, we will invite, through the use of Nextdoor and places like that, we will make sure that the public knows and that we get the potential addresses out there ahead of time, so people who might be affected by this will know, and we invite their comments and their input at that committee meeting August 17th. So we got some time before that. Thank you.
All right. Public Works, Alderman Lockmiller.
Our next meeting will be right here, Wednesday, August the 9th at 4:30. Agenda is still pending.
All right. Let's see. Assistant City Administrator, Director of Planning and Development, Kirkemeyer.
Thank you. I do have two items this evening. One is Lori Reichert, acts as the Secretary Treasurer for the Manchester Road, 8750 Manchester Road CID. They had forwarded their Board of Directors, and per our agreement, the Board of Aldermen are supposed to approve the Board of Directors for the CID each year. So again, it's kind of the housekeeping item that we have, but we do not need to adopt a resolution. That resolution is actually a resolution that their board will approve at their meeting in August. So really all we have is just a list of the Board of Directors. It's the same board that we've had for several years. They meet the criteria per the agreement. So what I'm really asking for is just a motion to approve the Board of Directors for the Manchester Road CID.
Your Honor, so moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board approve the 8750 Manchester Road Directors as submitted. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the motion as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
And then the second item that I have would also be in the form of a motion. We do have a representative from Target here tonight, and Target has requested a special use permit for their upcoming store promotion. And it's certainly a scaled-back version from what we've seen in previous years. So they are only asking for 2 storage containers, and the placement of those containers, we have found a very, I think, complimentary spot, which will be at the rear of the building next to the loading docks. And the fire department has approved both the location and the distance of those storage containers. If that would be all right with the Board of Aldermen, then I would also entertain that there would be a motion for approval for Target for the 2 storage containers. The duration I wrote up, but 90 days, for the next 90 days.
Your Honor, since we have not passed the potential change in code, it's still under the Director's Board of discretion.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But
So
she's
I can
exercising that discretion by coming here
Right.
tonight.
Yeah.
For your
By
approval.
bringing it, she's sort of done that. So
That's what
Okay.
the current code
I would
says,
entertain
can
a
tell them
motion to
here.
approve the special use permit as requested.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the board approve the special use permit as requested. Is there any discussion? Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor, just a question. Lisa, so these will be parallel to the building in the rear, is that right?
Well, they're gonna be out from the loading dock yet. So there's sometimes trailers in the loading dock, so they would be parallel to the trailers that are in the loading docks.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the special use permit as applied, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Great.
Those are the only items I had. Thank you.
Ways and Means, Alderman Dimmitt is not with us. Is there anyone from the Ways and Means Committee that would care to give us an update?
Only that I believe that our August meeting is going to be rescheduled to the second Thursday, which is that
August
August 10th? At 6 PM. The agenda is still being developed.
Good job.
And I do know that that's when the serious budget discussions will start. So I would encourage any of you that wants to make discussions and arguments regarding, I use the term tongue-in-cheek, but pet projects, that would be the place to have those discussions. It would be good if you attended those meetings and made your discussions there, so that by the time we get in here, we don't have to have all those discussions here. Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor. Clarification. Lisa, is that Ways and Means Committee meeting discussed? Is that going to be the resident budget forum that we have annually?
I don't
Or
believe
is
so.
that a different date?
No, I believe that's September or October.
Yeah, it's farther along.
It won't be, yeah.
Okey
It won't be
dokey.
near far enough along for that.
That's actually a public hearing. Here.
But I would, like I said, I would encourage the aldermen, if you have any interest in the budget or any portion of the budget, go to those meetings. You're more than welcome. Mr. City Attorney.
No report, sir.
And Madam City Administrator.
No more report?
No more report, all right. Madam Excise Commissioner.
No report.
Madam Library Liaison.
No report.
I have nothing from the Municipal League, and Historical Society, I don't believe, has anything.
I thought we agreed to remove Historical Society.
Yeah, I thought we
from
did
that.
too, but it keeps showing up, so. You know? Any announcements from the board? Alderman Leahy.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Ward 3 meeting for the July timeframe will be Tuesday night, July 25th at 7 PM here in the council room. All are invited.
Thank you. Mr.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Ward 4's monthly meeting will be next Tuesday at the Brentwood Forest Clubhouse at 6 o'clock for those who are in town to enjoy it.
All right. Small Brentwood Forest Ward 4 meeting. Any further announcements? Seeing none, do we have any new business this evening? All right. Item number 18 on the agenda, hearing of any matter of public interest upon the request of any person present. If anyone would care to come forward and address the board, you'll be given 3 minutes. Mrs. Plefka's been patiently waiting in the lobby. I thought she was waiting to come to the dais and give us a speech. No? Okay. Oh, you're just hanging out for him. All right. Yeah, okay. Item number 19 on the agenda. I do intend to have a closed session this evening, so I would entertain a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to 610-21-1 and 610-21-3.
Your Honor, I make a motion that we move to closed session pursuant to section 610.021 subsection 1 and 610.021 subsection 3, and that we adjourn from that closed session.
Second, Your Honor.
It's been moved and seconded that the board enter into closed section pursuant to those sections and adjourn from that closed session. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call, please.
Alderman, wait one second. Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Here, yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
and Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
All right, great. Why don't we say convene at 8:40 upstairs? How about that?